English Politics Podcast.
English Politics Podcast.
English Politics Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to another exciting episode of English Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Williams, and today we have something truly special in store for you. Our podcast has been bringing you in-depth insights into the most critical political discussions, but today we're diving deep into a figure who's no stranger to controversy, power, and attention, Mr. Donald Trump. As many of you know, Donald Trump served as the 45th President of the United States, and his time in office is filled with unprecedented events, policies, and strategies. However, the story we're about to uncover goes beyond the public persona. Today, we'll be discussing the untold strategies and hidden decisions that shaped Trump's approach to governance and his legacy as president. Over the years, we've seen a leader who always had an answer to every question, who thrived in the public eye. But what was really happening behind closed doors? How did he craft his policies, and what drove his decision-making? Today's episode is going to explore those very questions, and we are honored to have the man himself join us to shed light on his strategy during his presidency. Mr. Trump, thank you so much for being with us today. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to sharing some of the insights and strategies that the public might not have fully understood. There's a lot more than what meets the eye, and today we're going to get into it.
We're absolutely thrilled to have you here, Mr. Trump. As we all know, your presidency was marked by bold moves, dramatic shifts in policy, and, of course, a unique public image. However, it's the strategies behind those decisions that often remain unclear. In today's conversation, we want to take a closer look at those strategies and examine the thought processes and actions that guided your presidency. So, without further ado, let's dive in. We'll start with the first question. Mr. Trump, throughout your presidency, you were often portrayed as someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. What led you to take such bold and unconventional steps in terms of both domestic and foreign policy? What were the driving forces behind those decisions? Mr. Trump, throughout your presidency, you were often portrayed as someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. What led you to take such bold and unconventional steps in terms of both domestic and foreign policy? What were the driving forces behind those decisions?
Well, Sarah, the primary driving force behind my decisions was always what was best for the American people. I didn't want to follow the conventional path that the political elites had set for the country. I believed that America needed a new approach, a focus on putting the interests of American citizens first. That meant challenging long-standing policies, tackling trade deals that weren't in our favor, and standing firm in negotiations with other nations. I wanted to break through the stagnation that had become so common in Washington and shake things up, which is exactly what I did.
You made some significant moves regarding international relations, such as pulling out of the Paris Agreement and renegotiating NAFTA. What was your strategy behind these moves, and how did you determine what actions to take on the world stage?
When it came to international relations, my strategy was simple: America first. It was clear to me that many past agreements were unfair to the United States, costing us jobs and making us vulnerable. The Paris Agreement, for example, was detrimental to American businesses, while the global community seemed to get a free pass. I didn't want to keep pushing policies that hurt our economy. On renegotiating NAFTA, it was all about making sure that American workers and industries weren't getting the short end of the stick. My approach wasn't about pleasing foreign leaders. It was about protecting and improving the lives of Americans. Every decision was focused on making America stronger, economically and strategically.
Your administration was often characterized by bold, direct rhetoric, particularly on social media. How did you decide when to make a public statement, and how did you believe it helped advance your strategy?
Social media was a powerful tool for me. Traditional media often twisted the facts, so I used platforms like Twitter to communicate directly with the American people. I wanted to control the message, and social media allowed me to do that. Sometimes, it was about making a statement that would force a conversation or expose hypocrisy in the system. I didn't shy away from making bold comments because I wanted to break the conventional mold. It helped advance my strategy by shaking things up, getting people talking, and keeping the pressure on both domestic and foreign leaders. It wasn't just about tweeting for the sake of it. It was about using a new platform to execute a strategy of transparency and direct communication.
Throughout your presidency, your relationship with Congress was often contentious, particularly with members of the Democratic Party. How did you navigate that dynamic? And what was your strategy for achieving legislative success despite the opposition?
Navigating the political landscape in Washington was never easy, but it was about one thing: delivering results. I was always focused on pushing forward with policies that I believed would benefit the American people, even if it meant facing resistance. I understood the importance of compromise, but I wasn't afraid to fight for what I thought was right. My strategy was about finding allies where I could and using negotiation tactics to get things done, even when the odds seemed stacked against me. It wasn't always smooth, but in the end, we achieved significant tax reforms, judicial appointments, and a stronger economy. The fight was tough, but we never backed down.
Trump's untold strategy, behind the public persona. Donald Trump's rise to power was unlike any other in modern political history. While his public persona was often portrayed as bold, brash, and unapologetic, the strategies behind his decisions were deeply calculated. The world saw the flashy businessman, the reality TV star, and the polarizing president, but few truly understood the quiet, complex strategies that drove his every move. This is the story of Trump's untold strategy, an inside look at the moves he made that shaped his presidency, much of which went unnoticed by the public eye. The early days of Trump's presidential campaign were marked by uncertainty. His unconventional style, harsh rhetoric, and disregard for political norms made him a controversial figure. Many thought he would never make it past the early primaries, yet he emerged victorious, shocking pundits and experts alike. But what was behind this incredible rise? Trump's strategy was based on a deep understanding of the American political system, one that was both an outsider's perspective and an insider's knowledge. He saw a country divided, frustrated with political elites, and hungry for change. His rhetoric was not just about appealing to the discontented masses, but about giving them a voice. He capitalized on the anger, the fear, and the hope that Americans felt, especially those in Rust Belt states who had seen their livelihoods disappear to outsourcing and global trade. While many saw Trump's presidency as a result of his bombastic nature, his true strategy was grounded in the ability to read the political environment like few others could. Trump understood that traditional political campaigns, with their long speeches and soft rhetoric, had no place in a time of economic uncertainty and social unrest. He needed to break through the noise, and he did so with ease. His campaign was built on soundbites, sensationalism, and the ability to dominate the news cycle. The media manipulation. One of Trump's most effective strategies was his ability to control the media narrative. From the moment he descended the escalator at Trump Tower, he knew the media would either love him or hate him, but they would always cover him. His ability to command the headlines was unparalleled. This strategy was not just about garnering attention, it was about shaping perceptions. Every tweet, every controversial comment, every attack on the media was part of a broader narrative. Trump knew that the more attention he received, the more the public would be forced to confront his ideas, whether they agreed with them or not. He understood the power of repetition and outrage. In a time when attention spans were dwindling, his tactics kept him at the forefront of public discourse. But it wasn't just about making noise, it was about controlling the narrative. His tweets and statements were calculated to provoke a response, whether it was positive or negative. The more the media attacked him, the more he positioned himself as the underdog, the outsider who was fighting against the establishment. This narrative played well with his base, many of whom were disillusioned with Washington politics and saw Trump as their champion. Economic strategies. One of the cornerstones of Trump's strategy was his approach to the economy. He understood that a strong economy would be his ticket to success. His policies, particularly tax cuts and deregulation, were designed to stimulate growth and appeal to his core supporters in business and industry. The tax cuts, which were a hallmark of his administration, were deeply controversial but also strategically significant. By cutting corporate taxes, he sought to make American businesses more competitive globally, while also trying to spur job creation. But Trump's economic strategy went beyond just cutting taxes. He sought to reshape the global trading system, focusing on protectionist policies and renegotiating trade deals that he felt were unfavorable to the United States. The renegotiation of NAFTA into the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, was one of the key accomplishments of his administration. It was a move that Trump believed would bring jobs back to the U.S., especially in manufacturing and agriculture. However, his strategy wasn't always smooth. His trade war with China, which began with tariffs on Chinese goods, was a gamble. While it did succeed in forcing China to make certain concessions, it also led to economic uncertainty and raised prices on many consumer goods. Nevertheless, Trump remained confident in his strategy, believing that the long-term benefits would outweigh the short-term challenges. Foreign policy and nationalism. Trump's foreign policy strategy was rooted in his belief that the United States had been taken advantage of by other nations for far too long. His America First mantra was a clear signal that he would no longer play by the old rules of diplomacy. His decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement, his stance on NATO, and his rejection of the Iran nuclear deal were all moves designed to put American interests above all else. Trump's relationships with foreign leaders were marked by both cordiality and tension. His meetings with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un were historic, but they were also symbolic of his unorthodox approach to diplomacy. Trump believed that direct engagement with world leaders, even those with controversial backgrounds, would lead to breakthroughs. This approach was often criticized but also praised for its boldness. His administration sought to break away from traditional diplomacy and focus on what he considered to be tangible outcomes for the U.S. Yet, Trump's foreign policy was not without its challenges. His withdrawal from the Middle East, particularly the decision to pull U.S. troops from Syria, was met with fierce criticism, including from some of his own party. However, for Trump, the decision was about focusing on America's interests and moving away from endless wars that had drained resources and lives. This was a controversial but strategic move that appealed to his base, which was tired of military interventions. The power of the court. Another often overlooked aspect of Trump's strategy was his approach to the judiciary. Trump understood that the courts were an essential part of the political landscape, and he made a concerted effort to reshape the judiciary by appointing conservative judges. His appointments to the Supreme Court, particularly the nomination of Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, were strategic moves that would have a lasting impact on the future of American law. Trump's judicial appointments were designed to cement a conservative legacy that would outlast his presidency. By selecting judges who shared his ideological views, Trump sought to shift the balance of the courts for generations. This strategy was a reflection of his long-term thinking and understanding of the power of the judiciary in shaping national policies. The Trump brand. Throughout his presidency, Donald Trump maintained a brand that was both controversial and incredibly powerful. He was a master of self-promotion, always ensuring that his name was synonymous with success and power. Whether it was through his real estate empire, his television show, or his time in the White House, Trump was always in the public eye, always controlling the narrative. His strategy of personal branding extended beyond his presidency. It was about maintaining influence, even after leaving office. His post-presidential career has been marked by continued rallies, media appearances, and the shaping of the Republican Party and his image. Trump's brand is about more than just politics. It's about a persona that resonates with millions of Americans who see him as an embodiment of success, power, and rebellion against the establishment. As we look back on Donald Trump's presidency, it's clear that his strategy was multifaceted, far-reaching, and often misunderstood. While the public persona of Donald Trump may have been one of an outspoken, controversial leader, the strategies behind his presidency were deeply calculated. His approach to media, economics, foreign policy, and the courts were all part of a larger plan to reshape the political landscape of the United States. These untold strategies, hidden behind the noise and spectacle of his presidency, have left a lasting imprint on the nation's history. The true impact of Trump's presidency will continue to unfold in the years to come, but one thing is certain: his strategies were not just about headlines, they were about shaping the future of America in ways that few could have predicted. Before we conclude today's episode, I'd like to take a moment to thank Mr. Trump for joining us and offering such valuable insights into the untold strategies behind his presidency. It's been an eye-opening discussion, and I hope you all found it as fascinating as I did. Now, as we wrap up, I want to remind all of our listeners to support the English Politics Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family. By doing so, you're helping us continue to bring you top-quality content on the most important political topics. Stay tuned for more interviews and discussions that go beyond the headlines.
See you next time.